Okay, hello and welcome to this GCSE Design Technology theory video. This time it's 5c.5, which is finishing metals. Your objectives today are to know that the metals have different finishes applied to them to improve their aesthetics, be aware of the different methods that are used to finish different types of metal, and understand how surface treatments and finishes can affect the functional properties of metal. Grades 1, 2 and 3, you'll be able to identify ways in which metal products can be enhanced with surface finishes. 4, 5 and 6, you'll also be able to describe the positives and the negatives of different types of surface finish. 7, 8 and 9, you'll also be able to explain how to apply the most appropriate surface finish to different types of metal applications. So, surface treatments and finishes. Why do we finish metals? Well, first thing could be for protection. Metals are known to oxidize, which means that it could be, in general terms speaking, with an iron-based product like steel, it could rust. Or it could be aesthetics. It could be there to make the product look nicer because the natural finish of the metal doesn't quite cut it. So what types of finish do you think make metals look more aesthetically desirable and why? Have a quick think. Now, the different types of metal that you can have, we've got things like metal-specific paints. Special primers and paints that are used specifically to protect metals from the elements. These can be applied by a brush, roller or sprayed on. Some of the paints can protect against and remove corrosion, so they can start to remove rust spots. Specialty paints include primers, surface finish that you'd put on first. Then you'd have matte or gloss, metallic, textured, high heat or special effects paint such as glow in the dark or thermochromic that would be applied afterwards. It could be plastic dip coated. This is where the metal product gets heated and then it gets dipped into a powdered plastic that melts and then bonds to the outside surface. So effectively the hot metal gets lowered into a tank and then the plastic powder is a kind of a dust that gets blown over the surface and it'll stick to the surface of the metal that's been heated up, and then you're going to have a plastic coat which has been fully wrapped around it effectively. It protects from metal oxidization such as rust. It's going to provide an insulation, making it sure it's not quite as cold, so in the case of those weights it feels nicer. It'll improve the ergonomics, so it might make it more user-friendly to handle, and it will change the functional properties and the aesthetics. It makes it look nicer and it also makes it a little bit more functional. Hot blackening. This is where the metal part is dipped into a series of baths containing an alkaline cleaner first, water, hot caustic soda, that's the blackening compound, and then an oil sealant. The process can be done in really large batches for small parts, so you can do multiple items very cost effectively, and it creates a resistance similar to paint or plating, so it's going to stop rust appearing on them for a long period of time. Blackening though is only around 1 micron thick, so it doesn't really affect the product like paint would in terms of having a screw thread around one of the bolts down here and then not being able to get the nut on afterwards because it's all been filled in with the paint. It's really thin, 1 micron, very thin coating. Powder coating. This is when a fine dusting of either a thermoplastic polymer or a thermosetting polymer covers the part. The powder is electrostatically applied and then it gets cured. It's around about, or basically fired in an oven for around about 200 degrees, 30 minutes. It's going to provide a tough, even finish to protect the metal, and the coating thickness can be increased without any sagging, so you can get multiple layers without any runs appearing on it. It'll just coat the material and coat the product as a surface finish. The overspray, the bit that you don't use, can be collected up and then it can be recycled and that can be used and fed into the machine again. Polishing and brushing. This is a natural finish. Basically the external surface gets buffed to a mirror-like or a uniformly scratched surface. So it could be mirror-like in terms of that light switch, or it could be the brush finish like that one, where all the scratches are kind of going in the same direction as a grain and you get the nice appearance. Things like stainless steel, aluminium and nickel are perfect for this. It won't provide any protection to the metal at all. It's purely just going to be for the looks and appearance, the aesthetic purpose. It can cause rusting though to stainless steel because what happens is it will penetrate the top surface layer and then you can get small pittings of rust starting to appear on it. Knurling. This is a method where basically a pattern gets pressed onto a round section of metal. Now, generally speaking, something like this has had the knurled pattern pressed onto it. That's the tool that you'd use to create it. And you just rotate the item inside here. As it's then rotating inside there, the pattern's going to be applied to it. You're going to take a little bit of pressure coming in to force the pattern into the material, but you can get various different effects like you can see down here. Usually this is created using a centre lathe to turn the metal onto the knurling tool. Different tools can cut different patterns into it depending on the job, and it's normally used as some kind of grip or a feature function. Zinc galvanising. Galvanising is the process where you're coating a product in a layer of zinc. You submerge the metals into a molten zinc bath, and then effectively when it comes out it will be applied. The process is really low maintenance, it creates a resistance to the corrosion, and it's quite inexpensive to do. A lot of things like farm gates, and if you're having an object that's going to appear outside, things like RSJs for constructional buildings, and then for example the bucket down in the corner, those things are going to be outside quite a lot. The gal finish is perfect. Electroplating uses an electric current to add a really thin layer of another metal onto the outside surface, and this layer just adds protection. So you're going to use a metal that's probably going to be a little bit more hard wearing and resistant. It's going to improve the aesthetic quality, but it can also add value. So you can electroplate gold and silver, copper, silver, chrome plated. Okay, you can get the example there with the taps. You'll have a cheaper metal underneath, and the electroplating process will be applied on top. Rust stabilizer. So as you can see, half of the night is rusty and the other half isn't. Rust stabilizer, also known as rust converter, is a liquid that's painted or sprayed onto rusty metal, and it's going to harden off any of the oxidation, which is otherwise the corrosion, the rust. The tannic acid inside is going to convert the iron oxide, which is the actual rust, into iron tannate. This protective coating is going to serve as a primer for other paints. So once you've applied this over the top, then you can apply any other paint coat over the surface and the rust isn't going to penetrate through. It effectively converts the rust, therefore killing it. It'll stop the rust from spreading, and it will also help the rust to stop reoccurring. Metal lacquers. When a surface can suffer from any kind of tarnishing and any kind of oxidation, okay, but the original metal is quite attractive, you don't want to cover it up with paint, then add a clear coat. So this is a clear coat finish just to preserve what's underneath. Some cars will have a bit of a rusty surface on there, and companies will start to clear coat over the top to kind of keep the rusty finish as a bit of an effect. Generally speaking, we're trying to make metal look as if it's got no rust on it, and we're going to be protecting it along before then. So this can be applied by a brush, or it can be sprayed, it can be gloss, or it can be a matte dull finish, and normally we're looking at brass, aluminium, silver or copper. Abrasive blasting. Sand or lead shot, so tiny little small beads, are going to be fired at the surface of the metal under huge amounts of pressure. All these little tiny bits of grit which are hitting it at high speed are going to be knocking off any of the corrosion or rust on the surface. Okay, sand or lead shot is the most abrasive media to use. Things like glass beads and the plastic, they're the medium range ones. The lower range ones are normally things like baking soda and even ice blasting. Okay, it can be in large scale, so like you can see the guy in the background who's got the full body suit on, or it could be in a small scale situation in a very small tank where you just put your hands in and then blast against the surface. It's used for its own aesthetics, or it can prepare the surface for an additional finish afterwards just to clean it up. Okay, thanks very much. Speak to you soon.